I don't know why, but for whatever reason, when I try to tell one of these stories, I'm always up in the middle of the night, and that's where all my juiciest ones comes from. And I really can't tell you why that is. I think it just has something to do with like some weird biological mechanism that's been in our brains for God knows how long. I am no neurologist though, so I can't really tell you whether or not that has any merit whatsoever, but that's what we're here to talk about today, you know. We are back with another very juicy one today, and I have to tell you about this one because it is, oh my god, this is a lot. So my mother, as we all know, who've been watching this channel for a while, is a little bit crazy, right? She's definitely not a horrible person, she's definitely not beyond redeem, but she's done some really messed up stuff in her life, and she needs to be held accountable for it. And one of the things that she did is, she kind of kicked me out and made me sleep in the woods for a couple days, which is an insane thing to do as a parent, right? I don't know why you would ever want to do that to one of your kids. I really don't know what it accomplishes. I don't know what lesson is supposed to be learned. It kind of just feels like a punishment for punishment's sake. But then again, I feel like a lot of her punishments were like that, so I can't really say too much on it. But yeah, guys, before we get into it, if you can leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, that would help out a lot, as I'm trying to get 2,000 subscribers before the end of 2029. Yes, I know, very hard goal to reach. But yeah, guys, anyways. But yeah, this takes place back in 2022, and if you've been around the channel for a while, you know that 2022 is kind of like probably when me and my mother's petty relations were at their absolute worst. I have done some things wrong, she had done some things wrong, but one of the things that I feel like, you know, should have never happened is how much she punished me. Now listen, I'm not gonna lie, I could be a little bit of a shithead when I was 16, okay? But at the end of the day, I still cared very deeply about the people in my life, and I tried my best. And my mother was just having none of it. And this story opens up with how most of these Mullen stories do, an argument. I don't remember what the argument was over, because, I mean, there's so many of them, it's really hard to remember what each one of them is about, right? But me and my mother were having an argument. You know, it was, I bet you it's the typical, I'm just gonna fill in some blanks here, right? My mother was probably mad at me that I, like, didn't do the dishes or something, right? And we went back and forth arguing about this for God knows how long, before then my mother speaks up and she's like, fine, if you don't want to respect the rules of my house, then you do not get to live in my house anymore. Go pitch a tent in the backyard. Yeah, she really did this. She made me go pitch a tent in the backyard because I guess I wasn't respecting her house rule or something. Don't ask me how that works, I really don't know myself. I'm sure my mother has her reasons. I don't know what they are, but she had a reason, otherwise she wouldn't have done it anyways. But yeah, I obviously fight back, and I'm like, Mom, no, I don't want to sleep outside. And she says, well, you should have followed the house rules if you wanted to go outside, right? If you didn't want to have to sleep outside. And obviously, there was a back and forth over this, as any one of these punishments do, and it ends in me ultimately submitting and going outside. So, my mother threw a tent outside, a sleeping bag, and I guess that was really about it, right? She said I was allowed to come in for the bathroom and for no other reason, right? So, I have to go outside, and I have to pitch up this tent, right? And I had been camping before, so I knew how to pitch tents, right? I knew my ways in and out of working them. But the tent in question, I don't know. I went over to set up the tent in the backyard, which is like right next to this huge wooded area, like a deer could have walked out of there, or a bear at any moment, and it's kind of mauled my face, which would have been very sad. I would be very upset if I was not alive right now. But goes outside, right, and has to deal with all of this. So I walk outside and start pitching in this tent right next to the woods, right? Now, the yard was wet, is the problem, is because it had been raining for the past couple days, right? So it was really hard for me to find anywhere to, like, set up my tent, so to speak. And what I did is I set up this tent, and I'm not gonna lie, guys, I messed it up, right? The first few rungs that I posted into the ground went pretty well, I have to say. Definitely a decent job for, what is it, a 16-year-old setting up a tent after having only been camping one time. So I definitely give myself a bit of credit for doing that. But come the last one, I couldn't figure out how to get it in. And so I tried to go in and ask my mother for help, and of course she told me, like, gotta figure it out. You don't live in my house anymore, right? So I'm like, shit, man. So I go outside, right, and I think I figure out how, I don't remember how I got it down. I think what I did is I found like a really sturdy stick or some piece of metal that was sitting on the porch out back, and I managed to like stick it into the ground and keep the tent there, right? And so after that, right, I set up my tent, and I was very bored, okay? I didn't have a phone at the time, obviously. If you don't know why, go watch the video on the top right. It's a bit more of an intense one than this one, right? But I didn't have a phone, and I wasn't allowed to have a phone. So the only thing that my mother would let me do is, like, watch TV. And let me tell you, I really did not like the fact that I was having to set outside to begin with, like live in the woods basically, because me and my mother got into one of our normal fights, right? So I get a genius idea, right? I'm like, what if I go and grab the extension cord that's out back and sneak into the house and grab the TV? So I tried to do that, right? And I managed to get my hand on the extension cord and plug it into a little bit of an outlet that's like right next to the house, right? And then I eventually route this extension cord through the grass all the way over to my tent and managed to, get it in there. Now, the hard part was actually getting the TV. And I was not allowed in the house at this point, so what I said is I was going to use the bathroom, alright? It wasn't a lie, I did actually have to use the bathroom there, but what happened is I went to use the bathroom, and I managed to go back into my room, and I managed to get the TV, right? And my mother asked me, I don't know if she asked me, I'm not even sure if I managed to sneak it past her, or like I convinced her to let me out. I'm leaning more towards the former, but regardless, I somehow managed to get in there, and I managed to get the TV, right? And I went all the way back to my tent, and I plugged it in to the extension cord, and praise the Lord, I somehow got it working. Don't ask me how. This was like the most crude, rudimentary setup I had ever done for anything before, right? But I managed to get the TV working. Somehow, I got it working, right? And yeah, so I managed to turn the TV on, and I watched the TV all night. Right, until I finally pass out and go to bed. Now, the first night goes by, and things in the tent are pretty normal, right? I'm chilling out in the backyard, kind of doing my thing. I'm not really allowed back inside because, as I said, I didn't respect the rules of my mother's house, so she is punishing me for it by taking away my privilege to live in said house. Why'd she do that? You never know, but she did it. So, what happened is we woke up the next morning, right? And it was wet, right? It was really wet, and I wanted to go inside and end up, sitting on the toilet to go to the bathroom, and I was permitted. My grandmother also let me have some lunch, because this is right after the 4th of July, which, for those of you who don't live in America, it's our Independence Day over here. The day that we got independence from the British, and turned into the British, now, 200 years later. It's a really funny story, right? But, we had 4th of July left over, so I went in there, and my mother was at work, and I asked my grandmother, if I could eat, and she even let me stay inside and eat. She was really nice, because my grandmother did not like the kind of garbage that happened to the house like it normally does, because, listen, my grandmother was, and still to this day, doesn't agree with how my mother handles me or the kids, and it kind of is what it is, There's not much that anybody can do to kind of change her ways. I think the only thing that'll really ever get her in shape is, if she ends up in, prison, or she really gets, an epiphany that she needs to get her life together, right? And so, what happens, right, is I end up having to go back outside because I don't remember what it was. I'm pretty sure my grandmother told me to go back outside because she didn't want my mother to, upset me. So I went back at the tent, right? And I just sat out there and I watched TV the entire time. And I'm gonna be honest, for as much of a punishment as it was, it kind of felt less like a punishment and more like a little bit of a vacation because I didn't have to spend my time around my mother. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I'd quite literally rather sat outside than, deal with my mother, which was, it should be a sign that something is happening. I don't know what. You can leave that up to your own interpretation, but I was having a lot of fun outside in the tent, which is kind of the opposite of a punishment. And, the rest of that day goes by pretty normal. Eventually, my mother comes home, and after that, I'm not allowed back in to, grab food or anything because I'm supposed to be outside. I remember I tried to do it one time, and she said, what are you doing in here? You don't live in this house anymore. You live outside, right? And so I end up going back out to my tent, and I end up sleeping there, right? And, night goes by just fine, I end up watching the TV, I end up having fun back there, and next day comes around. And now, I know I said, kind of alluded to it had rained before the last night, but I woke up this morning and it was really soaked. The entire tent floor was at the top of the tent at least, was covered in a thin layer of misty dew, right? It was just kind of sitting there, and I'm like, shit, did it rain last night? And it's yeah, but I didn't turn on my TV because, like I said, everything was super condensated, right? And I did not want to go back and sleep out in that tent again, right? But my mother wouldn't let me, so I kind of just had to tough it. I went inside, I ate breakfast, right? My mother was at work again because at the time she was working at Amazon, very early shifts, so she was gone by the morning, and since my grandmother was there to watch the kids, obviously she disagreed with the punishment, so she'd, try to bend it as much as she could to let me inside. So I go inside, use the bathroom, eat breakfast, day goes on as normal, and I am unfortunately back out in the tent, I think my grandmother actually might have let me set in for a little bit because it was cold outside or whatnot, but eventually I had to go back outside because, it was my mother's rules, it was my mother's punishment, and I had to follow through with it. So I go back outside, I set in the tent, right? And now, this is where it gets interesting, because, you know, a couple hours go by, right? I'm sorry that I hit the mic there, I didn't mean to do that, right? But, like, a couple hours go by, right? Eventually my mother gets home, right? And when she gets home, she comes out to check on me in the tent, and I'm like, oh no, here we go, right? Because you've known by now that, like, every single interaction I have with my mother is almost exclusively negative, and is detrimental to my safety, my health, my well-being, XYZ. But she did something that I didn't expect. She's like, alright, Trilad, you gotta come in. Time to go, you know, whatever. And I'm like, wait, really? I thought I was supposed to be living outside. It's like, you can't anymore. It's raining. Because, yeah, apparently there was supposed to be a real bad storm coming in that night. And my mother, you know, she's good at, like, tracing the line of the law in order to, like, get me out of the house or get what she wants, right? But it's pretty clear cut and dry that you cannot leave your kid out in inclement weather, because if you do, that is, like, definitely a jailable offense. Not to say that anything she's done in the past hasn't been jailable, because it really might be. I have no idea, right? But oh my god, at the end of the day, right, you know, my mother forced me to, you know, pack up my stuff and go back in the house. And now, the story doesn't end there, because she wants me to clean up everything, right? She wants the tent and everything back the way it was before. And like I said, I was 16. I had no idea how to actually set up one of these tent thingies. So I end up that, you know, I pull the stakes out, pull out the metal rod or whatever that I found to keep it in the ground, right? And, the tent itself, getting that apart was pretty easy. My thing was rolling the tent back up and getting it in the bag, man, because I had no idea how I was supposed to put a tent up, okay? I had never done it before. I have never, like, put a tent back in the bag like I was supposed to, right? And I had a lot of trouble with this. And then my mother comes out and she's like, oh my god, Trilad, you seriously cannot roll up a tent? You're 16 years old. How do you not know how to do this yet? Or something like that. And I'm like, Mom, I've never done this before. And she's like, I don't care. You shouldn't have done this in the first place if you didn't want to have to face the consequences. I'm not sure if she said that last part. I need to make that abundantly clear. I'm kind of filling in a couple gaps here because I do not remember every single conversation, as I said, right? But I know she was mad at me for, like, not getting the tent. And eventually, my grandmother actually ends up coming out and helping me, like, set up the tent, because my mother was really mad at me, and she did not want me to come back in until that tent was completely and totally set back up the way it was before. And so she comes out and she helps me, you know, set the tent back up, and it was very helpful. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I could have done it myself. I mean, I probably could have eventually, but it would take like way too long for any of that to work, right? So, you know, my grandmother comes out, helps me set the tent back up. We set it back inside the house, and, well, not back inside the house, we put it in the garage, right? And we could never actually get it, right? Because here's the thing, I know I thought I had, but I really never got it back. Eventually, what happened is me and my grandmother and my mother ended up just getting the tent and, like, throwing it into the corner of the garage to where I think it's still sitting there to this day, right? There's just this tent setting in her garage because we could never figure out how to get it back in the thing. And my mother was like, why are you doing this? And, like, I can't get the tent back together. And I realistically, she couldn't make me set the tent back up because she would have actually gotten into a lot of legal trouble, and she made me go back out inside. She's like, fine, but I'm never buying you another tent again or something like that, right? And, yeah, after that, I was kind of free to go, you know? I got off my quote-unquote punishment early because the weather was way too bad for me to stay out there. Probably gonna be a thunderstorm or something. I know it had rained a couple times before. But anyways, yeah, so that's the story of how I had to sleep. My mother forced me out of my home and made me sleep in the woods for like a couple days. Yeah, it was definitely crazy. If there was a couple things I want you to take away for this, if you're a parent, for one, don't do anything that my mother did to me in this situation, alright? Just because you get into an argument with your child does not give you the right to quite literally make them sleep outside. I think that's a pretty normal thing to, like, understand, is that you should not be making your kids, like, sleep outside just because you have a disagreement. Because at the end of the day, parenting is tough. It's not easy, right? There are going to be some days where you feel like the kid is making your life way harder than it should be, and you know what? You're probably right. But at the end of the day, you as the parent are the one that needs to be stronger, and you need to keep yourself together, and you need to make sure that you're living your best life so their kids can live their best life. Because being a child isn't just about, you know, like, spawning a baby. You have to be forward with it. You have to be thoughtful. You have to care about the child as if it's an extension of yourself, because in all biological context, it really is an extension of yourself. So it is very imperative that you take care of that child, and you try to make sure the child has the best life it possibly can before it gets, you know, spat out into the wondrous world of adult life, which is not very wondrous, as a matter of fact. Gas is like almost $6 a gallon if you're going for diesel at this point. It is ridiculous. Can we please, like, I don't even know what's happening anymore, right? But, you know, another thing I want to say is that I definitely do recommend, like I said, going to speak to a trusted adult if you were a child or a teenager in this situation. Definitely go talk to a parent if your parent tries to tell you to do something like this. Like, she never got in trouble for it at the end of the day, but this is something that is very clearly not okay to do to your child, and it's very clearly something that you wouldn't want to have them to go through. So if you are, like, ever in any danger of being in a situation like you see in one of my videos, right, definitely talk to a trusted adult, because I'm not sure if anything is ever going to be done about my mother, right, but I know at the end of the day, it's kind of just the way things are. Sometimes you have to roll with the punches life gives you, and if you don't roll with them, well, you'll be a lot more depressed. So please, just, if you take anything away from this video, please do make sure that if anything, whether it be like a mother, a father, an aunt, an uncle, a spouse, whatever, if you were ever in a situation like this, please make sure you get out of there as quickly as possible, because if you don't, right, you're gonna be in for a bad time. But yeah, guys, that's about all from me today. If you do enjoy the video, please do make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment, tell me what you're thinking about it. This is definitely a crazy one. It's actually one of my favorite stories to, like, actually tell people about, because it's just so absurd, right? Get into a fight with my mother, and I end up having to, like, not clean, but, like, I have to end up sleeping outside. It was crazy, and I really enjoy telling this one, right? It was not a fun experience, mind you, but it was, you know, I definitely feel like I was a little bit of a sneakster there, getting the TV out and whatnot. But yeah, that's all for me. Join the Discord, link in the description. Make sure to subscribe if you're new around here. My name is Trilad. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye!